Arctic Sea, 1944. Night on the water closes like a fist. An escort captain counts the convoy by habit, by breath. 7 merchantmen in 2 columns, 2 tankers tucked in tight, and the low black fin of a trawler turned escort riding the weather like it's something he can talk down. He recites the names in his head, the way some men pray. Ore, grain, aviation fuel, medical crates, radio sets, spare propellers wrapped like infants. At midnight, his tally is steady. At dawn, it is wrong. The horizon has pulled its trick. Where there were ships, there is water. No distress calls, no smoke, only a line of wakes that go a little way and then forget what they were supposed to be. They will call it a phantom convoy. Ships that sailed into oblivion. But that's not a phrase the sea uses. The sea prefers accounting. The sea keeps the better ledger. Before we walk into the fog of war and the rooms where men write neat lines to hide messy things, subscribe and tap the bell. Around here, we tell the stories most people would rather forget. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. These cold water tales are scattered across every coast. Stay with me to the end. There's a single margin note, copied twice and almost erased a third time, that shifts this from disappearance to design. Names are altered, some records conflict. What I'm about to tell you is drawn from Convoy reports, a box of intercepted signals the archivist called noise, 3 letters that survived salt, and testimony from a hearing that changed nothing. We'll lay out what can be known, and the best ideas for the gaps. Not all of those ideas lead back to daylight. The route was the old punishment, Iceland to the Kola Inlet, threading the knives of ice and war. They left under a cover name meant to be forgotten, the way these things are. Let's call it Convoy KX3. Winter had not yet loosened its grip. The night was short, the dark long. The weather had opinions. To starboard, the coast of occupied Norway. To port, the reach of the pack. Above them, more enemy than sky. Below them, more cold than ocean. Arctic convoys were an agreement with risk. The price of nailing tin and fuel and food to ships and pushing them past U-boats and torpedo bombers into a narrow northern corridor was paid in hulls, bows and men. A convoy is a machine of many hearts. It beats best when counted. They sailed from the fjord with their lights caged and their radios quiet. An escort group out of Scapa took the first leg. Another would meet them near Bear Island and shepherd them east. The men aboard the freighters were young and older than that. One wireless operator had a photograph of his sister in a wool hat. He kept it folded in the back of the codebook like a charm. The ice pilot brought from Murmansk, a man with shoulders like a door and eyes like a cliff face, told the master of the lead ship, "Count your ships by their wakes, not their shadows. Shadows lie when the sky loses its mind." Day 1, wind with teeth. Day 2, a lull that made everyone nervous. By day 3, the convoy steadies into its rhythm. Steel sings, sea answers. The escort captain, call him Harland, makes his notes in a hand that grew neat to be heard over noise. He writes what he can control, bearings, distances, speed. He writes what he cannot, fog forming on the horizon like a decision. He makes a mark where he believes Bear Island is under the weather, and he adds in small letters, "Wait." Midnight. The fog becomes its own country. Light from the escort's bridge lantern turns into a wall 2 yards from his face. Sound is a rumor. Voices go soft with the way people learn to speak when they doubt their mouths will reach anyone. Harland measures the convoy by other means, the beat of the screws when they line, the way vibration travels through water. He writes in the log, 2 tankers steady, oiler dragging her stern as she always does, Liberty freighter yawing, orders sent. Understood. He makes the count. It agrees with the night before. 7 big hearts, 2 smaller ones, and the escorts. He notes the hour and the cold and nothing of fear, because he learned not to feed it with ink. Dawn, a word that means a shade lighter than black. Harland raises his glass to a horizon that refuses to exist. He calls for the count. Columns check in by lamp, and when lamps don't cut it, by a single prearranged sound through the whistle. He reads them as if reading last rites. He reaches the end of the sequence and pauses, waiting for the missing note. He prompts it. Tap code back. No answer. He tries again. A silence so large you can lay a ship in it. He orders a turn to starboard to lay eyes on what sound no longer carries. It takes 27 minutes to swing the formation and see where the lead should be. The place it ought to occupy is only water and the memory of water. He orders a sounding of the area. There is no oil slick, no floating crate, no scavenging gulls. He orders a wide turn to the other side. The second column is wrong too. The world has subtracted ships from his math. You cannot lose half a convoy in good weather without enemy fire or a bad sea and keep your sanity. But this was not good weather, and sanity is a ship that takes water early and often. He orders a dispersal pattern and regrets the order as the words leave his mouth because dispersal is the cousin of panic. He tells himself this is a navigational error, that the fog and the drift have made shadows mislead. He tells himself he will find them by noon. He finds nothing at noon. By 1400, an escort from the east makes wireless contact and says he has eyes on no one. The northerly escort reports ice forming on the wind and advises caution. A signal comes thin as a spider's thread. KX3. Adjust course 3 degrees south by east. Harland reads it 3 times. The call sign is theirs. The cipher is everything it should be. The hand that sends it, if a hand can be in a signal, feels wrong. He asks for authentication. The reply is correct and not convincing. He instructs the convoy to hold course. When the fog lifts, poorly and grudging, there remains the reality he tried not to see. His convoy is smaller than it was. The sea has decided to be unhelpful. The wakes he does find go a few hundred yards and dissolve. The horizon gives him nothing back. Note the time. Mark the position. The sea will not help you if you do not help yourself with your lines. Quick question for you. What's your first theory? U-boat pack under cover of fog, Luftwaffe torpedoes from the Norwegian coast, pack ice catching the unwary and crushing them silent, or something colder and more bureaucratic, a convoy that was never quite there in the way we think it was? Drop your guess in the comments. I'm pinning the sharpest one and following up next week. They turn back to search. They turn forward to make schedule. Both are correct, and neither feels like it. Harland writes to the Admiralty in a sentence that is too calm. 2 merchantmen and 1 oiler missing from formation after fog event. No distress received. Request further instruction. The answer takes 4 hours to arrive and reads like God pretending to be an office clerk. Proceed to rendezvous. Do not endanger remaining units. He orders the strictest radio discipline because danger increases when you talk too much. He orders the men to keep their eyes wide like doors. At Murmansk, the dockmaster counts hulls and writes down what he sees. At Scapa, a man in a warm room fetches a convoy schedule and pencils a line through 3 entries and writes, in the margin, weather. In Bannack, a pilot pulls a fur collar up under his ears and thinks about fuel and the nervous way the sea moves when it knows a ship will be at the wrong place in 10 minutes. In a small station in Iceland, an operator with tired fingers copies what he believes to be traffic from KX3 and signs his name to a sheet he will never see again. The inquiry is called for February. The war is hungry for explanation when explanation is cheap, otherwise it takes what it can get. The board sits in a room with ceilings that make men feel small. Harland testifies. His voice is steady. He says fog and count and silence. He says he has seen ships lifted by seas that did not seem large enough to lift them. He says ice makes men lie, even to themselves. The board writes down 3 things: fog, silence, error. It asks him whether a U-boat could carry off a convoy without showing its work. Harland says no. He says the sea is cruel, not magical. A wireless man from the East escort testifies he received a call sign that was correct and felt wrong. He is told that feeling is not a category of evidence. A Soviet ice pilot with a face like winter says there was pressure ice where no pressure ice should have been, but he can only swear to where it was after the fact. A Norwegian fisherman speaks of hearing engines in the night like a hymn with missing verses. He saw nothing. He is thanked and sent away. Theories pile the way snow does when no one makes a path. The first is the war's favorite, wolves in the water. A U-boat pack tracking them silent, masked by the fog and by Hunt-class escorts chasing a sound that wasn't there. Torpedoes that hit true and sent men into water so cold the screamer left their bodies as steam. No distress because the first hit took the radio. No debris because the pack ice gathered it the way a pocket gathers lint. A clean story. The war likes clean stories. But the math resists it. U-boats report victories like crows count spoons. Intercepts that flood out of the north on bad nights make patterns when the next day is better. No pack filed a feast matching KX-3. No victory roll matches the absence. The Germans kept their own brutal and beautiful ledgers. Their pride names their kills and their lies too. The sea keeps the better ledger, but submariners keep an eager one. The second theory has wings. Torpedo bombers in the fog, engines throttled down till they could have been cousins of the weather. But fog is a friend to a man close to water, and a liar to a man above it. Bombers want contrast. Fog eats contrast. Pilots who survived the north speak of moments where white and sea and sky were a single thing, and the idea of a horizon was a rumor. The second theory is lovely and wrong and is dropped like a stone. The third theory is older than war. The ice took them. The pack is not a static wall, it is a set of moving lungs. Pressure ridges that look modest from the deck can invert and become the fist that breaks a keel. Black ice forms like an apology and does not care if you accept it. A ship caught by pressure can go silent in seconds. Men inside do not scream so much as remember every good thing at once. A convoy that strayed a few degrees the wrong way could tug itself into a slow disaster. No calls, no smoke, just absence. KX-3 sailed a corridor flanked by rules. Ice respects none of them. But if the ice had them, it must have something to show. Oil, wood, a crate with words in a language anyone could read. The sea not only kills, it tells on itself. There was no debris line. There were no gull feasts. There were, later, and this matters whether you think it does or not, 3 life rings washed ashore on a coast that was wrong for them. One with letters roughly painted and then painted over, one with only the number 12 visible under white, and one blank except for a single nail hole where a name should have been. A Coast Guard man tagged them and stacked them in a shed with snow shovels, and forgot to record who took them away in spring. The fourth theory is the ugliest and, for that reason, sometimes the truest. Mines. The northern barrage did not vanish when men wished it would. Fields laid to stop one danger do not get the memo when danger changes. Routes shift and a line of steel holds to its job in the dark. The ice pilot says there was an off-limits square on his private map he avoided on instinct. A British officer says there was no such square and that instinct is not a navigational aid. The hearing nods. No one draws the square on the papers. On the 5th day after KX-3 fails to be itself, a fisherman out of Vardo finds a boat with no man in it. A lifeboat, oars lashed, rations unopened, a rope coiled as if it had learned good habits and meant to keep them. In the wooden backboard, a pencil mark, 8 short lines, then a long one, then a gap, then 3. He chalks it as tally and thinks of it all winter. Years later, asked under oath whether he saw letters, he says what still matters. I saw counting. He is told that is nothing, and thanked for it anyway. Pause here. If you've ever been in whiteout, on sea or land, tell me how your senses lied to you. Have you seen a horizon vanish? Have you stepped forward and felt the world move without your and a mission? These stories live on small truths. Your small truth might be the bridge across this one. The 6th theory is a story told quietly in rooms without windows, a radio phantom. The Admiralty knew the Germans listened, the Germans knew the Admiralty knew. A game of echoes, decoy traffic, call signs that matched by cipher, cadence and quirk, was sent to draw the wolf packs and the bombers from the real cargo. A convoy was built from paper and air, and men moved in formation to protect a thing that did not exist the way it was written. There is precedent for this. It is not romantic. It is arithmetic. The number of ships lost to turn a larger number of ships safe is a calculation in a column meant for pencil, not blood. And yet blood is what writes cleanest. The 7th theory stands with its back to all the others. The convoy was real, and then it was not. It left in one ledger and did not appear in another. Its cargo was not radio sets and grain and drums, but names, men for exchange, men who could not be named, men who would sleep under a flag as grey as the water that carried them. A ship with a manifest that never saw the light and an escort formation too lightly staffed for the path it chose. Erase a line at origin. Invent a line at destination. Oblivion as a desk job. It is a theory often used to cover other people's mistakes. In April, after too many meetings in too many rooms that smelled of tea and headache, a clerk opens a folder marked Returns and finds 3 letters folded flat. One is from a wireless operator never arrived, addressed to a sister who had tucked his picture into his codebook. He writes about fog like it is something you could pick up and carry to another table. He writes he doesn't trust traffic carrying his own call sign back at him, not because it is wrong, but because it is perfect. He writes, if we vanish, it won't be the sea that drowns. Hide it first. It will be the paper. The second letter is unsent. The ice pilot wrote it to a man in Murmansk whose name is rubbed thin by thumb and time. He says the winter north of Bear Island built pressure the way memory builds when you push it down. He says that if paper says the convoy went south, paper is lying. He says, I have learned the sound when ice decides you are below its dignity. The third is from a clerk at a listening station in Iceland who writes because he cannot not write. He describes an evening of traffic that repeated itself, the same phrase with a comma where it should not be, the same slight pause after the second letter of the call sign, a human pattern in a machine voice. He writes that he copied it dutifully and signed his name under an oath and then went outside and was sick because he recognized his own error returning to him in perfect form. He writes, I heard myself coming back to me. In June, a ship without a name reaches Murmansk. She is not on any schedule. Her paint is wrong for the season. Her plates sing when you knock them. On her bridge, a book with corners rounded by years is open to a page where someone has drawn a line across the Arctic and then erased it so many times the paper shines. The dockmaster asks for the manifest. The master gives him a list so clean a typist could have wept. It is the list of a ship that never left Scapa. It is the list you produce when you need a list in a hurry. The dockmaster signs anyway. The war is a contagious disease that makes men contagious to each other. I promised you a margin note. It appears twice in two separate places, and that, more than anything, is what makes me trust it. The first is in the back of the escort's night order book, in Harlan's hand, so small it was meant only for him. Count your ships by their wakes. Morning counts differently. The second turns up years later in the corner of a typed interrogation, and of a captured signals officer who had worked on the northern coast. Someone has made a note where they should not have. Our bearings find their ghosts. Their ghosts are built. There is, in faint pencil, the English by a translator who was too tidy and too tired. The convoy we chased was wires speaking to themselves. Now you have to choose what kind of cruelty you believe in. The seas is honest. It does what it does and leaves what it leaves. Wars is often a palimpsest, one story written over another until you can't trust which line is the oldest and which belongs to the last man who needed to look innocent. If KX-3 was a radio decoy, then the ships that sailed into oblivion were not the ones the papers named. They were the small vessels told to hold a line they had no business holding, so that metal birds would chase shadows and the real hulls would pass in silence far to the north, rubbing icicles from their bow rails and making their slow way behind a horizon that did not exist for the men who died to build it. If KX-3 died by ice, then the story is simpler and no less cruel. A set of small errors compounded, a weather report that came a breath late, an assumption held a breath too long, a ridge that rose under a keel, a sound like a sigh and then the end. Men going into the water without the chance to use the boats lashed ready, a fisherman finding a boat with its habits intact and no man to hold them to purpose. If KX-3 struck mines, the cruelty belongs to time. Fields laid in 1942 do not care for a stamp dated 1944. War makes traps and leaves them. Peace takes a long time to remember where they are. What happened next depends on which god you bring to sea with you. If you believe in the god of arithmetic, the Admiralty made a choice and then made it disappear. If you believe in the god of water, the ice decided the convoy was under its dignity. If you believe in the god of men, someone lied in a small way, and that lie grew ribs and swam. You stayed. So here's how we end. A seal drifts on a floe near Bear Island and looks briefly like a boy. A man on a trawler leans out and curses the way a voice bounces on frozen air. In a shed on a bleak coast, a ring with a painted-over name sits on a nail and becomes, for a while, just another circle. In a file with no index in a building that will be demolished, a translator's pencil confession waits under a typed page that says, "Nothing dangerous." And in a hand that learned neatness to be heard over noise, on the last page of a night order book, a captain wrote what he could not tell any of the men who slept and trusted him to keep their world small and navigable for one more hour. Count your ships by their wakes. Morning counts differently. If this reached you, subscribe and tap the bell. Tell me where you're listening from, and tell me which theory you choose. Ice, mines, wolves, or paper? I'll pin the most persuasive comment and return to this case with any new fragments we can pry loose from archives that prefer their quiet. Next time we go somewhere warmer on a map and colder in the soul. A desert airfield where a crate arrived without a sender and a ledger forgot to receive it. Until then, keep a light low, and if the fog finds you, count gently and count twice. The sea keeps the better ledger.